Hello. So we're going to have a look at our first lesson based around our topic of Saxons and Vikings. And this is all about the history of where they came from, why they came to Britain, when they came. And it's going to involve some aspects of geography because obviously we're going to look at maps as to see where they might come from and uh, how that affects what's happened in Britain and how that affected the kingdoms within Britain, because at that time the kingdoms were separated. So before we look at that, we need to know where they came from before the Saxons came into Britain. And we're going back to what we learnt about last year in spring, which was the Romans. Now we know that the Romans invaded Britain in about 55 BC. And we know they came all the way across from Rome, spread across Europe and across the Channel and into Britain. And when they came with them, they brought lots of things, inventions that helped Britain at that time. And some of them we can still see today. If you go to Bath, you can see a Roman bath and how they set them out and how they had aqueducts and how they used underfloor heating. And this is all the creation of central heating, sewage systems, road constructions, bridges, all of this, a lot of these ideas were brought across during the Roman invasion, and we can still see some of that today. And we learned about that last year. Now, in 410 AD, roughly around 410 AD, the Romans left Britain and they returned to Rome. Now, they returned to Rome because there were some issues within the Roman Empire and they were in trouble, and the Roman Empire was breaking down at that point. And so all the legions were called back, and all the citizens that were in Britain at the time were called back because they couldn't hold the country in the same way that they had at that point. So what happened then? All these people that had ruled the land, that had been governors of different parts of Britain, suddenly leave. And that leaves something. Or does it leave nothing? So we'll come back to that in a minute. First, look at who the Anglo Saxons were. So around AD 400, same time as the Romans were leaving, this meant that all the strong armies who had been in England, the Roman armies, defending off invaders from other lands, were no longer there. And invasion attempts by tribes from different places became successful, and they would raid and take the stuff that they wanted. Now, this was interesting because another wave of invaders came, and they were slightly different from other invaders. They didn't just come and invade and take over. They did come into Britain and they did take over, but they settled the land as well and worked with the people. They offered their help in defending their land, became part of that land. These were collectively, this group of settlers were collectively called the Anglo Saxons. It actually included other tribes from different countries as well. We had three main ones, which were the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes, and they came all to different parts of Britain, but did relatively the same thing. They offered protection, they offered control, and they went about that in a way which was more peaceful than the invasions had been before. So it was taken slightly nicer by the people there. They also had reasons for leaving their land because their land, where they were from, was prone to flooding. And this meant that it was difficult to live on the land. And Britain was a good place for farming, a good place for raising animals, generally had good land in order to live upon. So people came, and that's why invaders came, and that's why the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came to Britain, because what they wanted was already there. Okay, so where did they come from? So we've got on a map now of the invading tribes. And we can see that there's 3 different colors. So look at the map, and this map shows the different tribes that invade at the start of the Anglo-Saxon period, and the names of those tribes. We have the Anglos, the Saxons, and the Jutes. Choose one of those and imagine you belong to that tribe as they were on their way to invade Britain. Explain where you're coming from. So what was Denmark and Germany and the Netherlands like at that time? What was happening there? We remember. What was your tribe called? And where in Britain were you hoping to settle? Use the map to help you. There's a bonus question. Which tribe of invaders would have landed closest to our school? Would it have been the Anglo, the Saxons, or the Jutes? Maybe pick those. Maybe pick some others. But just have a go. Think about what you would have been like as you came across. Think about the reasons why you might have been coming. What did you know of Britain before you came? Pause now and have a go. Okay. I know that might have been hard because of the amount of knowledge you had may not have been that great. And that's kind of the idea. What we kind of want to do is just to get you thinking, just to see what you might already know, and then obviously we'll fill in more details. Now we know that northern Denmark, southern Denmark, Germany and the Netherlands, all of these areas are quite low lying, and they did have troubles with flooding, which meant the land was harder to live on. It was also colder. They had more extreme winters in especially northern Denmark and Denmark, but a lot more snows, and what this meant that it was harder to live on the land as well. And we'll come to why they went to where they did and that sort of thing in a minute. So, invaders and settlers. Invaders are people who want to try and enter a land by force, and settlers are people who go to a new place with the intention to move in and live there. Not all invaders are also settlers. Not all settlers have invaded. Can you think of a reason why somebody might invade but not settle? Come to another land, take what they wanted, be aggressive, and then leave again. How about some that want to settle without invading? Why might they just come into another land and settle on the land without taking over? At various stages in British history, people did invade and then settle. And one example of these is the Anglo Saxons. Pause now and just think about those two things. Who might invade and not settle, and who might settle without invading? And what might be the difference between them? So, we actually are going to think about some people that started out invading and not settling. They called it raiding, and that was the Vikings. And they did this because they had all their family and all their homes back in Norway and Sweden. And so they came across Denmark as well. They came across, took what they wanted and went back. And eventually they found out that actually the land was better, and they then settled there as well. But they started out invading and returning. But normally what happens if an invader just invades but doesn't settle is because their homeland is still rich. They still want to go back to it, but they're going there to get some riches that they can take back and enrich their homeland. And that's why you get invaders that do that. On the other hand, you might have settlers that have come without invading. And the first people into Britain, other than the Celts which were already there, the Beaker people that came across, they did just that. They came across and just settled the land. They didn't interfere with what was there beforehand, and just settled on the land and used the land that they were allowed to. And the reason they might do that is because they might not be very warrior-esque people. They might not have the weapons or the tools or the discipline in order to invade and take over. Or they might just not have that will to rule other people. Now, the Anglo Saxons were both of these two. They were invaders and settlers. And I did say earlier that they were relatively peaceful invaders. They did come across, they did exert force, they did tell them that if you didn't let us help you, then we'll take the land anyway. But the majority of the time, they came in and offered assistance in order to go, look, we'll help defend your land if you let us live on it and pay us tribute, basically taking over. And so there is this different idea of what settlers and invaders are, and Anglo Saxons are both of them to some extent. So what you have to look at when you're looking at invaders and settlers are what are called push and pull factors. So can you think of any reasons why people might want to move to a new country? See if you can make a list. Pause now and think about it. So there might be lots of reasons. And we're going to think about this in terms of the Anglo-Saxons. And there were lots of reasons why the Anglo-Saxons wanted to invade Britain. Some of those reasons were pull factors that pulled them to the new land because of the good things about Britain. And we talked about this before. We said that the good things about Britain is it has fertile land, it's easy to grow stuff on. There's a good, plentiful supply of rivers, so water is plentiful. They have animals for grazing, they have animals for riding, and it was all already there. And at that time, there was space. All of these things together made huge pull factors to anyone looking at Britain as a place to go. And it was surrounded by sea, which actually makes it more defensible than you think. But you have to have warriors to begin with. Then there are other factors that affect somebody leaving their homeland, and they're called push factors. They're the factors that drive them out of their own countries and make them want to find other places. And that could be poor quality of soil, too much flooding. It could be that the person in charge they don't want to follow and they were kicked out because of that. It's happened with some of the Vikings. So on this next page, I'm going to show you a list of different push and pull factors. What I want you to do is think whether you think they are pull factors or push factors. And I want you to circle any that you think are pull factors, things that you want that are causing them to want to come to Britain. And then I want you to underline the push factors, those things that are making them leave their own country. So here are our factors. Have a look, circle and underline, circling the pull, underlining the push. Which ones are which? Have a go and see what you can do. Pause now and try. Okay, so hopefully you've got a list of ones you think are pull and a list of ones you think are push factors. Let's have a quick look, read through them, and that will give you a time whilst I'm reading through them. We talk about them a little bit more to make up your mind as whether you think it's a pull and a push. So the first one is bad floods at home. Would you want to live in a land where there was bad floods all the time? Good farmland in Britain. Is that a push or a pull? Is it something making you want to go somewhere, or is it something that's making you want to leave somewhere? No Roman army left to defend Britain. Is this a reason why you might want to travel to that country, or is it a reason why you might want to leave it? Too many wars at home, too many competing tribes over the same space. How about not much space left at home? You've got all these tribes all over the place. You're quite warrior-esque in the way that your tribes run, quite aggressive, and therefore you're quite defensive of your space. Is it sensible then to leave and find other areas which don't have those worries? And how about the kings in Britain will pay money to your warriors if you come over and help them? Is that a pull or a push? Let's have a look. The first one, bad floods at home, is a push factor, a reason why you might want to leave. Good farmland in Britain is obviously a pull. You want to go there because you know you can grow crops there and you're going to be fed. No army left to defend Britain is definitely a pull. You're going to be able to invade a country without really having a fight. And that just makes life easier. Too many wars at home is a push factor. It's one of those things that, yes, that makes you stronger, but if you're always doing it, it takes a toll on your tribe. And you have to think about the good of your tribe. Not much space left at home, again, for the same reasons we thought of before. Why not leave to find more space where there is space? And finally, the kings of Britain paying money to your warriors to come and help them is definitely a pull factor, and one of the biggest pull factors there was, because for doing pretty much nothing, just being who you are, you get paid for it, which sounds a great thing. Now, over the next course of the couple of lessons, we're going to look at a few more maps and think about where they came from and why they came from those places. And we're going to continue to think about the Anglo Saxons to begin with. And the reason for that is that the Anglo Saxons were originally in place before we come to the Vikings. And there's an interesting link between the Anglo Saxons and Vikings. Why don't you see if you can find out that link? I'll see you in the next lesson.